A woman kneels on the floor of a wooden stilt house in eastern Indonesia. In front of her sits a fisherman, shirtless, his skin darkened by decades of equatorial sun. She presses an ultrasound wand against his abdomen, just below the ribs on his left side. On the portable screen beside her, an organ appears. She measures it. Then she measures it again. The number is wrong. Not slightly wrong. Not within the margin wrong. The spleen on her screen is roughly 50% larger than what her medical training says a human spleen should be. She moves to the next participant. Same result. And the next. Same result. 73 people, and not one of them fits the textbook. Her name is Melissa Ilardo, and she has just stumbled into one of the most startling genetic discoveries of the last decade. But the real question, the one that will take years to untangle, is not what she found. It is why nobody looked before. To understand what Ilardo was seeing, you have to understand what the spleen actually does during a dive. Most people think of it as a minor organ, a blood filter, something surgeons remove without much hesitation. But for mammals that hold their breath underwater, the spleen is everything. When a seal plunges into cold ocean water, its body triggers what is called the mammalian dive reflex. Heart rate drops. Blood vessels in the extremities constrict, redirecting oxygen to the brain and heart. And the spleen, which stores oxygenated red blood cells, contracts, squeezing that reserve into the bloodstream like a biological scuba tank. Here is the thing. Humans have this reflex too. Every one of us. Dunk your face in cold water and your heart rate will slow. Your peripheral blood vessels will tighten. Your spleen will give a small squeeze. It is an ancient mammalian inheritance, and for most of us, it is faint. A whisper of our evolutionary past. But among the Bajau, it is not a whisper. It is a shout. The Bajau, sometimes called the Sama Bajau, are a seafaring people spread across the Philippines, Malaysia, and Indonesia. For generations, possibly for thousands of years, they have lived on or beside the ocean. Many traditionally lived on houseboats, spending their entire lives on the water. They are, by every measure, the most aquatic human population on Earth. And the numbers back that up. Bajau freedivers routinely descend to depths exceeding 60 meters on a single breath. They spend more than 5 hours a day submerged. Some estimates put their daily underwater time at over 60% of their entire working day. They walk the ocean floor with stones in hand, hunting fish and sea cucumbers, in conditions that would cause most humans to black out within minutes. And yes, before you ask, I double-checked those numbers. They sound impossible. They are not. Picture what this looks like in practice. A Bajau diver sits on the edge of a narrow wooden boat, hand-carved from a single trunk. He takes a few slow breaths, nothing dramatic, no hyperventilation ritual. Then he drops. Feet first, no fins, no wetsuit, no mask. Some carry carved wooden goggles, many do not. They descend using stones as weights, falling through the water column until the seafloor materializes beneath them, and then they walk. They walk along the bottom, scanning for octopus dens and sea cucumber clusters, as casually as you would walk through a grocery store. Their heart rates drop. Their blood retreats from their fingers and toes. Their spleens contract. Many Bajau children undergo a practice that sounds brutal to outside ears. They intentionally rupture their own eardrums. The pain of pressure equalization during deep dives is debilitating, and a perforated eardrum eliminates it. Older Bajau divers often have hearing damage from this, but underwater, they move without pain, without hesitation, at depths that would cripple a recreational diver. It is a cultural adaptation layered on top of a biological one. For decades, scientists who studied the Bajau assumed all of this was training. Practice. Cultural knowledge passed from parent to child. Impressive, certainly, but ultimately learned behavior, no different in principle from a professional athlete pushing the limits of conditioning. The assumption was simple. Human bodies are human bodies. Some people just use them harder. That assumption was wrong. Actually, let me back up for a second, because the reason it took so long to challenge that assumption is important, and it says more about how science works than most people realize. When researchers studied indigenous diving populations before Ilardo's work, they measured the obvious things: lung capacity, heart rate during submersion, oxygen saturation after breath holds. These are physiological measurements, things your body does in real time in response to an activity. And what they found was consistent with training effects. Divers who practiced more performed better. Their bodies responded more efficiently. Case closed. But here is what nobody measured. Nobody measured the organs. It sounds absurd in hindsight. If you want to know whether a population has genetically adapted to diving, you look at the hardware, not just the performance. You measure the spleen, the organ that determines how much oxygen your body can mobilize during a breath hold. But spleen size was not part of the standard toolkit for studying diving physiology. It was a clinical measurement, something doctors checked for disease, for infection, for blood disorders. Not something anthropologists thought to compare between populations. There was also a disciplinary silo at work. The people studying the Bajau were physiologists and anthropologists. The people who understood splenic contraction and its role in oxygen mobilization were marine mammal biologists studying seals and whales. These two fields were not reading each other's literature. The connection between what a Weddell seal does at 400 meters and what a Bajau diver does at 60 meters was sitting in plain sight, split across two academic traditions that rarely overlapped. A lot of you in the comments on our recent genetics videos have asked why obvious connections like this get missed for so long. This is exactly why. The evidence existed. The framework existed. They just lived in different buildings. And there is a subtler problem still. The assumption that diving skill was learned created a kind of intellectual ceiling. If you already believe the explanation is cultural, you do not design studies to look for genetic evidence. The answer shaped the question. The question never challenged the answer. This is how paradigms survive. Not because the evidence supports them, but because the evidence that would challenge them is never collected. Ilardo changed that, and I think the way she did it is genuinely elegant. She was a PhD student, first at the University of Copenhagen, working under Eske Willerslev, and later with the evolutionary geneticist Rasmus Nielsen at UC Berkeley. Her idea was straightforward, which is what made it powerful. If the Bajau have been diving for generations, and if diving ability has fitness consequences, meaning better divers eat more, survive longer, have more children, then natural selection should have left a signature in their DNA. But you cannot just compare the Bajau to some abstract baseline. You need a control group, a neighboring population that shares genetic ancestry but not dive. That is what the Saluan provided. The Saluan are an agricultural people living on nearby islands in Sulawesi, Indonesia. Similar ancestry, different lifestyle. One group farms the land, the other farms the sea. Ilardo traveled to both communities with a portable ultrasound machine. This was not a gleaming hospital lab. This was fieldwork in its rawest form. Wooden houses on stilts over turquoise water, diesel generators for power, humidity that fogged equipment. She measured spleens, 73 Bajau, 63 Saluan. Person by person, scan by scan, the data accumulated on her laptop screen. The difference was immediate and stark. Bajau spleens were roughly 50% larger, on average, than Saluan spleens. Not a subtle statistical trend you need software to detect. A difference you could see, on the ultrasound, with your own eyes. But here is the detail that elevates this from interesting to extraordinary. She did not just measure the divers. She measured Bajau individuals who had never dived. People who, for whatever reason, had not taken up the family trade. And their spleens were large too, not quite as large as the active divers, but dramatically larger than the Saluan. Training does not explain that. You cannot grow an organ through practice if you have never practiced. The enlarged spleen is not a response, it is an inheritance. I went back and reread the original paper 3 times because the numbers seemed almost too clean. But the statistical analysis held. This was not a subtle signal buried in noise. This was a population-level organ difference, visible on an ultrasound screen, confirmed by genomics. If you are finding this story as fascinating as I did when I first encountered it, this might be a good time to mention that we are working on a connected piece about Tibetan high-altitude adaptations, which, remarkably, involve a gene inherited from an entirely different human species. If you want to catch that when it drops, subscribing is the simplest way to make sure you do. The genetic analysis went deeper. Ilardo and Nielsen's team collected DNA samples and performed a genome-wide comparison between the Bajau and Saluan populations, using Han Chinese genomes as an outgroup reference. They were looking for signatures of natural selection, stretches of DNA where the Bajau showed unusual patterns consistent with recent adaptive evolution. They found 3 distinct regions. The first, and most significant, was a variant in a gene called PDE10A. This gene is linked to thyroid hormone signaling, and in animal studies, thyroid hormones directly influence spleen size. Mice with higher thyroid activity develop larger spleens. The Bajau carry a version of PDE10A that appears to amplify this pathway. It is, in effect, a genetic instruction to build a bigger oxygen tank. The second was BDKRB2, a gene involved in peripheral vasoconstriction. During a dive, blood needs to retreat from the limbs and concentrate around vital organs. The Bajau variant of this gene appears to make that redistribution faster and more efficient, meaning more oxygen where it matters, for longer. The third was FAM178B, associated with the body's response to elevated carbon dioxide. When you hold your breath, carbon dioxide builds up. That is what triggers the desperate urge to surface. The Bajau variant appears to dampen that alarm, extending the window of comfortable submersion before panic sets in. 3 genes, 3 separate mechanisms, all pointing in the same direction, a body redesigned over generations for life underwater. And this is the part that stopped me cold. This pattern, a larger spleen paired with enhanced vasoconstriction and altered gas tolerance, is not unique in the animal kingdom. It is the exact suite of adaptations found in Weddell seals, the deepest diving mammals on Earth. 2 species, separated by tens of millions of years of evolution, arriving at the same solution through completely different lineages. Convergent evolution. The sea asked the same question of seals and humans, and it got the same answer. Let me put that in perspective, because I think this is the most underappreciated part of the entire study. When we talk about convergent evolution, we usually mean things like wings developing independently in birds and bats, or eyes evolving separately in vertebrates and cephalopods. These are examples separated by hundreds of millions of years. The Bajau-Weddell seal comparison involves a human population that may have diverged from its non-diving neighbors as recently as 1,000 years ago, converging on a suite of traits that took marine mammals millions of years to develop. That is not just interesting biology. That is a statement about the speed at which natural selection can reshape a human body when the pressure is strong enough and the reward is survival. What does this rule out? Chance. Random genetic drift does not produce 3 coordinated adaptations that all improve the same function. Training effects do not enlarge the spleens of people who never trained. Cultural transmission does not alter allele frequencies at specific genomic loci. The only mechanism that produces this signature is natural selection acting on heritable variation. The Bajau did not learn to be different. They became different. Now, I want to be careful here, because this is where the story gets genuinely complicated, and I think some of the coverage of this study glossed over the hard parts. What the cell paper demonstrates convincingly is that the Bajau carry genetic variants associated with diving-relevant traits, and that these variants show signatures of natural selection. That is solid. The spleen data is solid. The genomic analysis is solid. What is not settled is the timeline. How long has this been going on? Estimates for how long the Bajau have been a sea nomadic people range from roughly 1,000 years to potentially tens of thousands. The genetic signatures suggest the selection has been ongoing, but pinpointing exactly when it began is difficult. If the Bajau lifestyle is relatively recent, say 1,000 years, then the selection pressure was intense, driving organ-level changes in a remarkably short evolutionary window. If it is ancient, the changes are less surprising in terms of speed, but raise different questions about population continuity and migration. There is also the question of how representative the studied populations are. 73 Bajau and 63 Saluan is a meaningful sample for a field study in remote islands of eastern Indonesia, but it is not the kind of biobank-scale dataset that genomicists typically prefer. The signal was strong enough to survive statistical correction, but replication in larger, independent cohorts would strengthen the claims. And here is a tension I find genuinely interesting, and one I think deserves its own video eventually. The Bajau are not the only population that shows signs of aquatic adaptation. The Moken, sea nomads of the Andaman Sea near Thailand and Myanmar, have been shown to have extraordinary underwater visual acuity, particularly in children. Studies led by Anna Gislin at Lund University found that Moken children can constrict their pupils to a degree that other populations cannot, reducing them to their absolute minimum diameter. The result is pinpoint focus underwater, like switching from a blurry window to a precision lens. These children can see clearly at depth without goggles, picking out small shells and sea creatures on the ocean floor with accuracy that European children in the same study could not match. Is this learned? Genetic? Both? Gislin's research suggests that European children can be trained to achieve similar pupil constriction, which would point toward a learned skill. But the speed and extent of the Moken adaptation raises questions. Are we looking at a cultural technique or at a population where the nervous system has been subtly tuned by generations of selection? The research is not definitive, and that ambiguity is the point. The broader question hovering behind all of this is one that makes some scientists deeply uncomfortable. How plastic is the human body really? We tend to think of human evolution as something that happened in the deep past, on the African savanna, hundreds of thousands of years ago. The Bajau challenge that. They suggest that evolution has been sculpting human bodies in response to specific environments much more recently and much more aggressively than the textbooks imply. And they are not alone. Tibetan populations carry a variant of the EPAS1 gene, almost certainly inherited from Denisovans, that allows them to thrive at high altitudes where oxygen is scarce. Andes Highlanders have a completely different set of adaptations to the same problem, involving hemoglobin concentrations rather than oxygen-sensing pathways. Two populations, one challenge, two independent genetic solutions. Same principle, different hardware. The picture emerging is that Homo sapiens is not one thing. We are a species of variants, shaped by the specific pressures of the places we chose to live. The Bajau are not an anomaly. They are evidence that the human body is still being edited. I rewrote this closing section 3 times because the evidence pulls in 2 directions, and I think it is honest to say that. The genetic story of the Bajau is remarkable. It is well supported. It reframes what we think human bodies can become. But it is also a story that is running out of time. Across Southeast Asia, the Bajau way of life is disappearing. Government sedentarization policies have moved many Bajau families onto land. Overfishing and dynamite fishing have degraded the coral ecosystems they depend on. Maritime territorial boundaries, drawn by states that never consulted them, have restricted their movement across waters their ancestors navigated freely. The generation that Ilardo measured, the divers with 50% larger spleens, who walk the ocean floor on a single breath, who carry 3 distinct genetic signatures of aquatic life, may be among the last to live the way their bodies were built to live. The selection pressure that shaped them is weakening. The environment that demanded those adaptations is being dismantled. And here is what stays with me. Right now, somewhere in the Coral Triangle, there are children growing up on land whose bodies still carry the blueprint for the sea. Their spleens are still oversized. Their vasoconstriction genes still fire faster than yours or mine. Their carbon dioxide tolerance is still calibrated for depths most of us will never reach. They have inherited a body designed for an ocean their grandparents knew, but they may never work. Evolution spent generations building something extraordinary in these people. We are watching, in real time, as the world decides whether to let it matter.